7 years of silence. I finally returned to New York with my 7-year-old son to visit my parents. The moment I stepped off the plane, I ran straight into my ex-fiancé's best friend at the airport. He blocked my way and asked, "It's been 7 years, Chloe. When are you going to apologize to Austin for running away from your own wedding?" His best friend, Austin Sinclair, was the ex-fiancé I had almost married. 7 years ago, we were standing in a luxury hotel, ready to exchange our vows. But right before I was supposed to walk down the aisle, he suddenly halted the ceremony. He reached into the crowd, pulled a girl in a white dress onto the stage, and made a passionate announcement to all the guests. "Serena is my first love. I promised her that I would walk her down the aisle once in this lifetime. After today, I will be a married man and settle down. I'm taking this opportunity to fulfill my promise to her." After saying that, he nodded to the priest, signaling him to continue. The crowd gasped. Everyone looked at me, waiting to see the bride become the biggest laughingstock in the city. I stood there in silence for a few seconds. Then, I grabbed the skirt of my wedding gown and walked out of the venue. He didn't chase after me, and I didn't wait. Now, 7 years had passed, and my child was already 7 years old. Yet, my ex-fiancé's best friend was still here, trying to convince me to apologize so we could rekindle our old flame. I laughed out loud. I pulled my son out from behind me and pushed him forward. "Sweetheart, say hi to the uncle. Tell him what your daddy's name is." Carter stared at the little boy in disbelief. "Chloe, you actually ran away with his child? You gave birth to Austin's son." I mean, using a kid to tie him down is a pretty cheap trick, but hey, at least it shows Austin didn't wait 7 years for nothing. I knew he had completely misunderstood. I corrected him calmly. "This child has nothing to do with Austin Sinclair. I got married 7 years ago. He is the son of my current husband." Carter froze, looking at me as if I had just said the most ridiculous thing in the world. "You dared to marry someone else behind Austin's back? Do you have any idea how crazily he's been looking for you?" I nodded, my expression completely serene. "Yes, I got married 7 years ago." Just then, my Uber arrived. I tried to push past him to walk out, but he grabbed my suitcase, refusing to let go. "Chloe, make yourself clear. What do you mean you got married 7 years ago? How old is this kid? Is he Austin's?" Carter's agitated voice was like a thunderclap, drawing curious stares from the travelers around us. But he didn't care. His eyes widened like saucers, scanning my son's face inch by inch. He kept nodding to himself, utterly convinced of his own theory. "This kid is definitely Austin's blood. Look at those big eyes, double eyelids, and those dimples. Chloe, you've got some nerve, running away with his secret baby. No wonder you kept silent for 7 years. You wanted to wait until the child grew up, so you could use him to force your way into the Sinclair family. You are so calculating, Chloe." I frowned. I couldn't see a single resemblance between my son and Austin. After all, my husband was of French-American descent. The kid's genetics were entirely different. Before I could speak, Carter continued his lecture. "Even though Austin never stopped looking for you, and even cold-shouldered Serena for your sake, as his brother, I still have to warn you. Don't think you can act high and mighty just because you have his kid. You ruined the Sinclair family's reputation when you fled the wedding 7 years ago. If Austin hadn't taken the punishment from his father to get his parents to forgive you, you would have been blacklisted from high society forever. It's still early. Let's go to a luxury store right now. Buy some expensive whiskey and gifts. When we go to the Sinclair mansion later to beg for forgiveness, I can at least help put in a good word for you." "Stop right there." I couldn't stand his voice anymore and cut him off. "Who said I'm going to the Sinclair house? Let me remind you again. I am married. This child belongs to my husband. His last name is Vance, and his father is Ethan Vance." "Chloe." I didn't know if the word husband had triggered him, but Carter suddenly grabbed my wrist, squeezing so hard it felt like he wanted to crush my bones. "You're 30 years old. Can you stop being so childish? Do you still think you're some young, naive girl? Yes, you're beautiful and talented, but the Vance family? An elite global shipping empire? A rude, classless runaway bride like you wants to climb onto the Vance family? Have you lost your mind while living abroad?" The Vance family was the most prominent shipping dynasty in the country. To support national trade, they had moved their main operations to New York over the past few years. They were incredibly powerful, a force that even the Sinclair family wouldn't dare to provoke. And in Carter's eyes, I was just a gold digger who had been publicly humiliated by Austin. Seeing me stay silent, his tone softened, and he began to lecture me with a sigh. "I know Austin made a mistake 7 years ago, but he's a billionaire, and he waited for you for 7 years. Isn't that enough? Yes, he didn't apologize, and he didn't chase after you. But over the years, no matter how much he liked Serena, he never married her, did he? Chloe, don't be so ungrateful. Carter sighed and took a business card from his pocket, handing it to me. This is Austin's private contact. He has inherited Sinclair Enterprises now. He's one of the top entrepreneurs in New York, young, handsome, and filthy rich. Countless women dream of marrying him. Don't waste this opportunity. He looked at me with absolute certainty. He was positive that I would ecstatically grab Austin's card, call him immediately, admit my mistakes, and beg for a happy family reunion. Instead, I took the card, glanced at it, and tore it into tiny pieces. Too late. 7 years ago, on the day of my wedding with Austin, my mother was so excited that she couldn't sleep at all the night before. My father didn't say much, but he secretly wiped away tears behind my back before we left. And my grandparents, who lived a simple life in rural Maine, saved up for months just to fly in. They were so old, yet they insisted on coming because they didn't want to miss their beloved granddaughter's big day. I thought that day would be the happiest day of my life. But right before I was supposed to walk down the aisle, Austin halted the ceremony. He pulled Serena, who was also wearing a white gown, onto the stage and confessed his feelings to her in front of all the guests. Serena is my first love. I promised her that I would walk her down the aisle once in this lifetime. After today, I will be another woman's husband. This is my last chance. Chloe, you'll let me do this, right? Clutching my bouquet, I looked around the hall in absolute confusion, feeling as if my heart had been ripped out of my chest. Why? I asked him. Why did he have to humiliate me like this at our own wedding? Austin smirked and pointed at my parents and grandparents sitting in the front row. It's nothing. I just noticed how much your cheap relatives love to freeload off my family. Since I'm willing to marry you anyway, what's wrong with sharing a bit of the spotlight with Serena? The crowd began to whisper, pointing fingers at my parents and grandparents. My grandfather, a retired school principal who valued honor above all else, had a heart attack on the spot. My grandmother, embarrassed and red-faced, tried to explain, but Austin's snobbish relatives threw garbage at her and shouted insults. I looked at the wedding dress that was supposed to symbolize love. After a moment of silence, I grabbed my skirt, turned around, and led my family out of the hotel without looking back. From the day of the ruined wedding to the day I decided to move abroad, 7 full days passed. Austin never came to apologize. Instead, his first love, Serena, showed up with Austin's mother. In the hotel cafe, they held hands like a real mother and daughter. But the moment they saw me, their smiles vanished. Serena spoke in a slow, patronizing tone. Chloe, I'm really sorry about the wedding. I didn't expect Austin to still remember our promise after we'd been broken up for so long. I'm sorry you were humiliated. Mrs. Sinclair patted Serena's hand gently. Why are you apologizing? Austin did what he was supposed to do. You two are childhood sweethearts. A newcomer could never compare to that. Then, she turned to me with an elegant, fake smile. Chloe, I'm not trying to criticize you. Just don't take it to heart. I took a sip of my coffee, the bitter taste spreading through my mouth. Mrs. Sinclair took a check from her designer bag and pushed it toward me. There's $500,000 on this check. Take it and get your family out of New York. I stared at the check and asked quietly, is this what Austin wants? Of course, Mrs. Sinclair sneered. You ran away from the wedding. What else do you expect my son to do? Do you know who Serena is? Her father is the Sinclair family's most valued business partner. As for you, she paused for a second and sighed with disdain. You're just a small-town girl who got a lucky glimpse of high society. This is more than enough for you, don't you think? I didn't say a word. I took the check, donated every penny of it to an elementary school in my hometown, and left the country. I had been gone for 7 years. And now my son was 7 years old. Chloe, are you even listening to me? Carter's hysterical voice dragged me back to reality. He looked at me with an expression of pure frustration, as if I were beyond saving. Austin is incredibly successful now, and he still misses you. If you don't take this chance to apologize, you'll never get him back. You used to be so scheming. How can you be so stupid now? Looking at his angry face, I felt nothing but exhaustion. I raised my voice to make sure he heard me clearly. I, Chloe, am married. My husband loves me, and my son is wonderful. I am living a great life, and I don't need anyone's forgiveness. Stop bothering me. After saying that, I grabbed my son's hand and pulled him toward the waiting Uber. Carter tried to chase us, but he was left eating our exhaust fumes. Panicking, he pulled out his phone, opened Snapchat, and quickly messaged Austin. Austin, I just saw Chloe. She's back in New York. On the other side of the screen, the man froze. He stood up so fast, he almost crashed into his office's glass door, rushing out in a frenzy. Arriving at our pre-booked luxury hotel, I unpacked our bags and took my son down to the lobby restaurant for lunch. As soon as the elevator doors opened, a loud gasp echoed through the lobby. Austin, there she is. Chloe is coming down. I looked up. Carter was standing in the lobby, accompanied by a very handsome man. He was tall, dressed in a bespoke designer suit, with his hair slightly messy over his forehead. It was obvious he had rushed over in a desperate hurry. My ex-fiancé, the man I had almost married, Austin Sinclair. He stood a few feet away, his eyes locked onto the little boy holding my hand. His Adam's apple bobbed as he choked out. Chloe, is he my son? I froze. Memories flashed through my mind. Like most cliched rich boy meets poor girl romances, Austin and I had fallen in love at first sight in college. He was a wealthy heir who threw thousands of dollars around like pocket change. I was a hardworking scholarship student from a small town, working part-time at a local diner to pay for my books. Because of a chance encounter, we fell in love and stayed together for 5 years. For his sake, I quit my part-time job and studied like crazy. After graduation, I joined the Sinclair enterprise and became one of the most talented designers in New York. For my sake, he rebelled against his family, gave up his dream of studying history, and took over his family's business. He protected me from the whispers of those who called me a gold digger, turning me into his official fiancé. We had poured everything into that relationship until Serena returned. She was perfect, beautiful, elegant, and Austin's childhood sweetheart. At first, I didn't care. Trust was the most important thing between partners, and Austin loved me so much. We were getting married after all. But reality hit hard. Austin began working later and later. He canceled our dates more and more frequently. Once, because I couldn't decide on the invitation designs, I went to his office to find him. His secretary stopped me coldly. Mr. Sinclair is in a private meeting. No one is allowed to disturb him. But a second later, Serena walked past me with an elegant sway, pushing his office door open without even knocking. That day, I lost my temper in front of Austin for the first time. I demanded to know what his relationship with Serena really was. He didn't answer. Instead, he threw a stack of printed screenshots onto the desk. They were receipts of the first-class tickets and 5-star hotel rooms I had booked for my parents. He looked at me with deep disappointment. Chloe, do you remember when you wouldn't even buy a $50 shirt because you thought it was too expensive? They all said you were only after my money. I didn't want to believe them, but look at this. I stood there, shocked. I tried to explain that I was earning my own money now and just wanted to give my aging parents a comfortable trip. I even pulled up my bank statement to prove that every single cent spent was my own. But Austin only gave me a cold grunt and told me to get out. After that, our relationship turned icy. I tried everything to fix it. I stopped using the black card he gave me for the wedding. I kept every single receipt of my personal expenses and handed them to his assistant. 3 days before the wedding, to save money, I even gave up on the diamond-encrusted gown I had initially chosen and picked a simple, satin dress that cost half the price. On the day of my final fitting, Carter and Serena both showed up. As I walked out of the dressing room, I heard Serena whispering to Austin, "You should really sign a prenuptial agreement. Girls from her background are always looking for a payday." I was young and proud back then. I couldn't take that kind of humiliation. I interrupted them on the spot and confronted Austin. "If you don't trust me, then let's call off this wedding." Austin panicked. He frantically explained that he didn't mean it that way, promising he had never thought about a prenup. He insisted the wedding would go on as planned. I thought he finally trusted me, until he brought Serena onto the stage at our wedding and publicly insulted my family. Only then did I realize he had never believed in me. And now, Austin was staring at me, practically begging for an answer. "Chloe, please tell me, is he my child?" I stepped back, hiding my son behind me. "No. He is my husband's child. His last name is Vance." The name seemed to trigger Austin. His eyes instantly turned bloodshot. He gritted his teeth, veins popping on his forehead. "Chloe, at least make up a believable lie. We've been apart for 7 years, and he is exactly 7 years old. Don't tell me you slept with some random guy the second you ran away from me." I frowned. What did he mean by some random guy? I had broken up with him, dated normally, got married, and had a baby. How did that make my husband a random guy in his mouth? I took a deep breath to reply, but suddenly, a violent force pushed me from behind. I fell to the floor, my palms scraping against the hard tiles, leaving them bloody and raw. "Mom, what are you doing?" Austin gasped, immediately reaching out to help me up. But I flinched away from him, leaving him freezing in place. Mrs. Sinclair had grabbed my son's wrist, her voice shrill and piercing. "What am I doing?" "I'm taking my grandson back. I've seen plenty of gold diggers like her. She's just playing hard to get by, pretending she doesn't want you. She took my money and kidnapped my grandson. I haven't called the police yet, which is already a mercy." She turned to her bodyguards, shouting, "What are you standing there for? Take my grandson." The bodyguards immediately stepped forward, grabbing Leo and pulling him away. Panicking, I tried to scramble up to fight them, but Austin pinned me down. "Give me back my son. How many times do I have to tell you? He is not Austin's child." I screamed. Leo was terrified, sobbing hysterically. "Let me go. I want my mommy and daddy." "Mommy, help me." Austin tried to hold my hands while using a soft, sickening voice to soothe the boy. "Don't cry, buddy. Your mommy is just being difficult. Daddy is taking you home." Leo kicked violently, one of his sneakers flying off. He screamed, his bare foot stomping on the floor. "You're not my dad. My dad is Ethan Vance. He's coming, and he's going to ruin you." Austin's face darkened instantly. He glared at the bodyguards. "The kid is brainwashed. He dares to use Ethan Vance's name to threaten us? Who knows what kind of trouble he'll cause in the future? Marcus, don't hold back. Teach him some manners." Mrs. Sinclair nodded in agreement. "Exactly. He clearly has no manners. He needs to be disciplined." Thank God Carter found him. Otherwise, who knows when our Sinclair blood would finally return home. She ordered the bodyguards coldly. "Tie his hands, gag him, and lock him in the playroom when we get home. Don't let him out until he learns to behave." "I dare you to try." A deep, powerful voice boomed through the lobby. I looked up. Several sleek black Bentleys had pulled up outside the hotel. Surrounded by a group of imposing security guards, a tall, commanding man with an undeniable aura of power stepped into the lobby. Who else could it be but my husband, Ethan Vance? The hotel lobby fell into a suffocating, dead silence. Ethan's polished leather boots clicked against the immaculate marble floor, a steady, rhythmic sound that seemed to sync with the frantic beating of my heart. His presence was overwhelming, a physical force that instantly shifted the atmosphere in the room. Behind him, a dozen security guards in sharp, dark suits fanned out, their movements disciplined and synchronized. The hotel staff, who had previously stood by in helpless hesitation, quickly retreated into the corners, recognizing the storm that had just walked through the doors. Ethan didn't look at Austin. He didn't look at Carter or Mrs. Sinclair. His eyes instantly swept the floor, locking onto me. When he saw me kneeling on the ground, my hands scraped and raw, a dark, lethal shadow crossed his face. The temperature in the lobby seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Daddy!" Leo's terrified cry broke the silence. Mrs. Sinclair's bodyguards, suddenly realizing who they were dealing with, hesitated. But they weren't fast enough. Ethan's security team moved with terrifying speed. In a matter of seconds, the guards holding my son were disarmed, their arms twisted behind their backs as they were forced to the floor. Leo was released. He didn't hesitate for a second. He ran past Austin, sobbing hysterically, and threw his small arms around Ethan's leg. "Daddy, they tried to take me. They said they were going to lock me in a room." Ethan bent down, lifting Leo into his arms with a practiced, gentle ease. He cradled the back of Leo's head, his expression softening for a fraction of a second as he kissed our son's forehead. "I've got you, buddy. No one is locking you anywhere. You're safe." He handed Leo to Pierre, his trusted personal assistant who had followed him in. "Take him to the car. Make sure he has some water." "Yes, Mr. Vance." Pierre nodded, shielding Leo as they walked out toward the waiting fleet of Bentleys. With Leo safe, Ethan turned his full attention back to the room. The tenderness in his eyes vanished, replaced by an icy, absolute fury. He walked over to where I was still trying to stand. Austin was frozen beside me, his hand still half extended as if he had wanted to help me up, but didn't dare to move. Ethan didn't say a word to him. He simply stepped between us, his tall, broad frame completely cutting Austin out of my sight. He knelt on the dusty floor, entirely ignoring the fact that his bespoke trousers were touching the ground, and gently took my wrists. "Chloe," he murmured, his voice a low, soothing vibration. "Are you hurt anywhere else?" "Just my hands. I whispered, the adrenaline finally starting to fade, leaving behind a sharp, burning sting in my palms. They tried to take him, Ethan. I know, he said, his thumb gently brushing the clean skin near my wrist. I'm here now. It's over. He helped me stand, keeping a firm, supportive arm wrapped around my waist. The contrast between his warm, steady hold and the violent grip Austin had used just moments ago was like night and day.
Ethan Banche.
Carter's voice was barely a squeak. The smug, arrogant expression he had worn at the airport was completely gone, replaced by a pale, sweat-slicked mask of terror. He looked at Ethan, then at me, his brain desperately trying to piece together a reality he had so confidently dismissed. Mrs. Sinclair, however, was still clinging to her delusions of high society superiority. She smoothed her designer skirt, swallowing hard, and tried to force a polite, albeit trembling, smile. Mr. Vance, there must be some mistake, she said, her voice shaking despite her best efforts. We didn't know this woman is a fraud. She is Austin's runaway fiancé. She stole money from our family 7 years ago and fled. This child is clearly a Sinclair. She is trying to use him to. Silence, Ethan said. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. The sheer authority in his voice cut Mrs. Sinclair off as effectively as a physical blow. She gasped, her face turning a mottled, embarrassed red. Ethan looked at Austin, his gaze cold and dissecting. Sinclair, I believe my wife has told your associates several times today that she is married. To me. Austin's eyes were wide, staring at Ethan's hand wrapped protectively around my waist. He looked like a man who had just watched his entire world crumble in a single second. Married?
To you?
No, that's impossible. Chloe, how could you be married to Ethan Vance? Why is it impossible, Austin? I asked, looking at him with nothing but pity. Because in your mind, I was just a poor, desperate girl who couldn't survive without your charity? You assumed that because I left, my life must have ended. You thought my entire existence revolved around waiting for your forgiveness. But the child, he's 7. Austin stammered, his voice cracking. The timeline? Carter said. My son is 6 years old, nearly 7. Ethan corrected him, his voice dangerously low. We met in France, a week after she left New York. We married 6 months later, and Leo was born a year after that. He has my DNA, my father's eyes, and my family's name. And today, your mother's thugs laid hands on him. Ethan turned to his head of security, who was standing nearby. Call the police. I want Mrs. Sinclair, her son, and their bodyguards arrested for attempted kidnapping, assault, and battery. Austin panicked. Mr. Vance, please. My mother didn't know. It was a misunderstanding. We were just trying to protect our family's bloodline. We can't have the police involved. Sinclair Enterprises is in the middle of a major merger with the city's port authority. That merger is dead, Ethan said simply. And by tomorrow morning, Sinclair Enterprises will be facing a series of audits, lawsuits, and supply chain disruptions that you will not survive. You touched my wife. You threatened my son. Did you really think you would walk away from this? Ethan, please. Austin stepped forward, but 2 of Ethan's security guards immediately moved in, blocking him with hard, unyielding chests. Don't speak to my husband, I said, looking at Austin one last time. 7 years ago, you stood on a stage and let your family throw insults at my grandparents. You let them humiliate my parents. You thought your money made you untouchable. Let's see how much your money protects you now. Within 10 minutes, the flashing red and blue lights of the New York Police Department illuminated the hotel lobby. Mrs. Sinclair was hysterical as the officers placed handcuffs around her manicured wrists. She screamed about her status, her lawyers, and her connections, but the officers, fully aware of who Ethan Vance was and the weight his name carried, ignored her entirely. Austin tried to intervene, but he, too, was detained for questioning regarding the attempted kidnapping of a minor. As they were led away, Carter stood in the corner, shaking like a leaf, desperately trying to blend into the wallpaper. Ethan didn't even spare him a glance. He kept his arm around me, guiding me gently out of the hotel and into the quiet comfort of the Bentley. The Vance estate in New York was a sprawling, historic mansion in Upper East Side, surrounded by high stone walls and lush, manicured gardens, a sanctuary of peace in the middle of the bustling city. Inside our private quarters, the atmosphere was warm and quiet. The scent of sandalwood and lavender filled the air. Leo had already calmed down. After a warm bath and a cup of hot cocoa, he was fast asleep in his new bedroom, clutching his favorite plush bear. I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at my hands. Ethan's family doctor had already cleaned and bandaged them, wrapping them in soft white gauze. The physical pain was gone, replaced by a dull ache, but my mind was still racing, pulling me back to the past. The door clicked open and Ethan walked in. He had changed out of his suit into a soft gray cashmere sweater and dark trousers. He looked tired, but the moment his eyes landed on me, the tension in his shoulders seemed to melt away. He walked over, sitting down beside me on the bed. He didn't say anything at first. He just gently took my bandaged hands in his, bringing them to his lips and kissing the knuckles. "How are you feeling?" he asked softly. "I'm okay," I said, leaning my head against his shoulder. "Just tired." I didn't expect to run into them the moment I stepped off the plane. "I should have been there," Ethan murmured, his voice laced with guilt. "If my flight from London hadn't been delayed, I would have met you at the gate. I shouldn't have let you face them alone." "Ethan, it's not your fault," I said, turning my head to look at him. "You couldn't have known. Besides, you came. You always come." He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes and wrapped his arms around me, pulling me close. As I lay against his chest, listening to the steady, reassuring beat of his heart, my mind drifted back to France, 7 years ago. When I first arrived in Brittany, I was a broken shell of a person. My self-esteem had been completely shattered by Austin's gaslighting and his family's cruelty. I had spent years shrinking myself, trying to be the perfect, quiet fiancé who didn't spend too much money, who didn't embarrass him, who accepted his coldness as a normal part of a relationship. I had started working in a small, independent design boutique in a quiet coastal town, pouring my grief and anger into my sketches. That was where I met Ethan. He wasn't the billionaire tycoon to me back then. He was just a quiet, handsome man who came into the shop every Tuesday, looking at my designs with a deep, silent appreciation. One day, when a difficult customer had brought me to tears, Ethan had stepped in. He didn't shout or throw money around. He simply spoke with a calm, unshakable authority that made the customer apologize and leave. Afterward, he had invited me for a cup of coffee. We talked for hours. For the first time in 5 years, I met a man who didn't look at my background with disdain. He didn't care that my parents were middle class or that my grandparents lived in rural Maine. He listened to my ideas, praised my talent, and treated me as an equal. When he finally told me his last name was Vance, I had tried to run away. I was terrified of wealthy families, terrified of being humiliated again. But Ethan didn't let me go. He didn't chase me with grand, empty gestures. Instead, he showed up at my boutique every single day with a single cup of my favorite coffee, waiting patiently until I was ready to trust him. He rebuilt me, piece by piece. He showed me that love wasn't a transaction. It wasn't about hiding who you were or proving your worth. It was about mutual respect, trust, and safety. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan's voice drifted into my thoughts, pulling me back to the present. "Just thinking about how lucky I am," I whispered, squeezing his hand. "No, Chloe," Ethan said, his voice serious as he looked into my eyes. "I'm the lucky one. And I promise you, those who hurt you in the past will pay for what they did. Every single one of them." The next morning, the financial world of New York was hit by a massive earthquake. The news of Mrs. Sinclair's arrest for attempted kidnapping had leaked to the press. Headlines dominated the morning papers and financial blogs. Sinclair matriarch arrested in luxury hotel lobby for attempted kidnapping. Sinclair Enterprises under investigation. Vance Group terminates all shipping and logistics contracts. The fall of an empire. Sinclair stock plummets 30% overnight. I sat at the kitchen island, sipping my tea, as Ethan read through the reports on his tablet. He looked completely unbothered, as if he were simply reading the weather forecast. "The Port Authority has officially pulled out of the merger with Sinclair Enterprises," Ethan said calmly, taking a sip of his black coffee. "Without our shipping lines and logistics support, they can't fulfill their contracts. Their partners are panicking." "What about Austin?" I asked. "He was released on bail late last night," Ethan replied, his eyes narrowing slightly. "But his lawyers are scrambling. I've hired the best legal team in the country to ensure the charges against his mother stick. She won't be getting off with a fine, Chloe. Attempted kidnapping of a minor is a federal offense, and I will make sure she spends time behind bars." Just then, my phone buzzed on the counter. I picked it up. It was an unknown number. I hesitated for a moment before pressing answer. "Chloe, please don't hang up." It was Austin's voice. He sounded exhausted, defeated, and completely stripped of the arrogant confidence he had carried just 24 hours ago. "What do you want, Austin?" I asked, my voice cold. Chloe, we need to talk. Please. Just 5 minutes, he begged. I didn't know about my mother. I swear I didn't know she was going to do that. I was just so shocked to see you, and Carter told me I made a mistake. A massive mistake. You made a mistake 7 years ago, Austin, I said. And you've been making them every single day since. Do not call this number again. Chloe, wait. Sinclair Enterprises is dying, he cried, his voice laced with genuine panic. Vance Group is pulling our contracts. We're going to go bankrupt within a month. Please tell your husband to stop. I'll do anything. I'll apologize to your parents, to your grandparents. I'll issue a public statement apologizing for what happened at the wedding. Just please, don't ruin my family. I let out a soft, bitter laugh. You'll apologize now? Now that your company is on the line? Now that your money is threatened? Chloe, 7 years ago, my grandfather had a heart attack on the floor of your wedding venue. Your relatives threw trash at my grandmother. And you stood there and told me my family was freeloading off yours. Did you apologize then, Austin? There was silence on the other end of the line. No, I continued, my voice steady and unyielding. You didn't. You sent your mother with a $500,000 check to buy my silence and run my family out of town. Well, let me tell you something, Austin. I donated every single penny of that check to a school in my hometown. I didn't want your dirty money then, and I don't care about your ruin now. You and your family built your status on stepping on others. It's time you learned what it feels like to be on the bottom. I hung up the phone and blocked the number. Ethan reached over, taking my hand. Are you all right? I've never been better, I said, a deep sense of relief washing over me. 2 weeks passed. The Sinclair family's downward spiral was swift and merciless. Without the Vance Group's cooperation, Sinclair Enterprises was unable to transport their goods. Their warehouses were overflowing, their clients were suing them for breach of contract, and their stock had completely collapsed. Austin had tried every avenue to save his company, but no one in New York dared to help him. To help the Sinclair family was to offend the Vance family, and no one was stupid enough to make an enemy of Ethan Vance. Even Serena's family, the Sinclairs' most valued business partners, had officially severed all ties with them. I learned from a mutual acquaintance that the moment Sinclair Enterprises began to fall, Serena's father had immediately canceled their joint ventures and pulled all his investments. Serena, who had spent the last 7 years waiting to marry Austin, had reportedly packed her bags and left for Europe, realizing that the Sinclair fortune was gone. But the final blow was yet to come. To celebrate the Vance Group's official relocation of their global headquarters to New York, Ethan was hosting a massive high society gala at the Plaza Hotel. Every prominent figure in the city, politicians, billionaires, celebrities, and foreign diplomats, had been invited. It was the social event of the decade, a statement of the Vance family's absolute dominance. And Ethan wanted me by his side. Are you sure you want to go? Ethan asked me on the night of the gala, as I stood in front of the mirror in our dressing room. We don't have to go if you're not ready to face the New York crowd. I turned around, smiling at him. Ethan, I'm more than ready. I was wearing a bespoke gown of midnight blue silk, designed by myself. It was elegant, structured, and radiated a quiet, regal confidence. My hair was swept up in an elegant updo, exposing my neck and the brilliant sapphire necklace Ethan had gifted me for our anniversary. My hands had completely healed, the soft skin free of any scars. I was no longer the nervous, insecure girl who had stood in a cheap satin wedding dress, trying to save money so her wealthy fiancé wouldn't think she was a gold digger. I was Chloe Vance. And I was finally home. When we arrived at the Plaza Hotel, the red carpet was swarming with reporters and photographers. The moment Ethan stepped out of the limousine and turned to hand me out, the flashing lights were almost blinding. Mr. Vance. Mrs. Vance. Look over here. Mrs. Vance, is it true you are the lead designer for the new Vance creative division? I kept a serene, polite smile on my face as Ethan guided me through the crowd, his hand resting warm and steady on the small of my back. Inside, the grand ballroom was a spectacular sight. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the high ceilings, casting a warm, golden glow over the hundreds of guests dressed in their finest attire. As we walked in, a collective hush fell over the room. Heads turned, and whispers began to ripple through the crowd. Is that Chloe, the girl from 7 years ago? She married Ethan Vance. My God, she looks stunning. I ignored the whispers, walking with my head held high beside my husband. We were greeted by some of the most powerful people in the country, all of them treating me with the utmost respect and admiration. About an hour into the event, While Ethan was speaking with a prominent French diplomat, I excused myself to get a glass of water from the bar. As I walked toward the quieter side of the ballroom, a figure suddenly stepped out from behind a marble pillar, blocking my path. It was Austin. I gasped slightly, taking a step back. He looked terrible. He had somehow managed to get into the gala, likely by bribing a staff member or using an old connection, but he didn't belong here. His designer suit, which would have looked pristine weeks ago, was wrinkled and hung loosely on his thin frame. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot and surrounded by dark circles. "Chloe," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Please, don't run away." I looked around, noticing two of our security guards immediately spotting him and moving in. I raised a hand, signaling them to wait. "I'm not running, Austin," I said, my voice calm and completely devoid of fear. "But you shouldn't be here. You weren't invited." "I had to see you," he said, taking a step closer, though he stopped when he saw my cold expression. "Chloe, please. I've been going through our old things. I found your old bank statements from 7 years ago. The ones I threw in your face." He let out a dry, choked sob. "I saw them. I saw that you paid for every single flight, every single hotel room for your parents with your own money. You didn't use a single cent of my black card. You didn't even use the wedding budget. You saved me money." "I know, Austin," I said quietly. "I tried to tell you that 7 years ago, but you chose to believe Serena. You chose to believe your mother. You chose to believe your own arrogance." "I was a fool," Austin cried, tears finally spilling down his cheeks. "I was so insecure. Everyone kept saying you were only with me for my money. I wanted to prove to them, to myself, that I was the one in control. I thought if I showed you I could walk Serena down the aisle, it would prove you loved me for me, not my status. I thought you would swallow your pride and stay. You thought humiliating me and my family on our wedding day was a test of love?" I asked, a wave of disgust washing over me. "You are sicker than I thought."
"I'm sorry, Chloe."
"I am so sorry," he begged, reaching out as if to grab my hand, but he stopped himself. "I never married Serena. I couldn't. Every time I looked at her, I just saw what I had lost. I've spent 7 years looking for you. I kept your favorite design sketches in my desk. I never stopped loving you." "No, Austin," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "You didn't love me. You loved the control you had over me. You loved the fact that I was a quiet scholarship girl who looked up to you. The moment I stood up for myself and walked out, your pride was wounded. That's what you've been chasing for 7 years. Your lost pride, not me." "Chloe, please." "Austin." A sharp, shrill voice interrupted us. We both turned to see Serena walking toward us. She was wearing a flashy, over-the-top red dress, but her face was tight with anger and desperation. "Austin, what are you doing?" she demanded, grabbing his arm. "I told you, we shouldn't have come here. My father is furious that you dragged us into this mess. And you're still begging this charity case for mercy?" She glared at me, her eyes flashing with jealousy. "Don't think you're special just because you found another rich man, Chloe. A girl like you will always be a classless outsider in this city." I didn't even have time to reply before a cold, powerful voice echoed behind us. "Is that so?" Ethan stepped out of the crowd, his eyes locked onto Serena. His presence was so intimidating that Serena instantly let go of Austin's arm, taking a step back in fear. "Miss Carter," Ethan said, his voice smooth but lethal. "I believe your father's company is currently undergoing a massive tax audit, courtesy of the federal government. I would suggest you worry more about your own family's impending bankruptcy than my wife's social standing." Serena's face drained of all color. "Mr. Vance." "As for you, Sinclair," Ethan turned his gaze to Austin. "You were warned. You entered this venue without an invitation, and you approached my wife." He raised a hand, and within seconds, for security guards, accompanied by 2 on-duty police officers who had been stationed at the hotel, stepped forward. "Officers," Ethan said calmly, "these 2 individuals are trespassing and harassing my guests. Please escort them out. And ensure Mr. Sinclair's bail conditions are reviewed, as he is currently under investigation for the attempted kidnapping of my son." "Right away, Mr. Vance." The lead officer nodded.
"No."
"Chloe, please." Austin screamed as the officers grabbed his arms, pulling him back. "Just tell him to stop. We had 5 years. You can't just destroy everything." Serena was also shrieking, trying to pull away from the security guards as they led her toward the exit. "Let go of me. Do you know who I am?" "Austin, do something." But Austin couldn't do anything. He was forced to his knees as they handcuffed him for violating his bail conditions by approaching me. The entire ballroom stood in silence, watching the dramatic downfall of the once mighty Austin Sinclair and his first love. They were dragged out of the Plaza Hotel in front of the very high society they had once used to humiliate me. When they were gone, the whispers started again, but this time, they were filled with awe and respect for the Vance family. Ethan turned to me, his eyes filled with a soft, protective warmth. He reached out, gently wiping a stray tear from my cheek. Not a tear of sadness, but of final, absolute closure. "Are you okay, mon amour?" he asked softly. "I'm perfect," I said, a genuine, radiant smile spreading across my face. I took his arm, and together, we walked back into the center of the ballroom, leaving the ghosts of the past behind us forever. A month later, the Sinclair family story had officially reached its end. Sinclair Enterprises declared bankruptcy. Their assets were liquidated, and their name was erased from the New York Business Registry. Mrs. Sinclair was sentenced to 3 years in a federal penitentiary for her role in the attempted kidnapping of Leo. Austin, stripped of his fortune and his reputation, was forced to leave New York, moving to a small, obscure town in the Midwest to avoid the public shame. Carter, his loyal enabler, was blacklisted from every major financial firm in the country, his career entirely ruined. As for Serena, her father's company was seized by the government for massive tax evasion, leaving her family completely destitute. But in the quiet coastal town of Maine, none of that mattered. The sun was setting over the ocean, casting a warm, golden-orange glow over the private beach behind my grandparents' new home. Ethan had bought them a beautiful, spacious estate overlooking the water, a place where my grandfather could fish in peace and my grandmother could tend to her beautiful rose garden. My parents were there too, sitting on the porch, laughing and drinking tea. Out on the sand, Leo was running around with a colorful kite, his laughter echoing over the sound of the crashing waves. Ethan stood beside me, his arm wrapped tightly around my shoulders, keeping me warm against the cool ocean breeze. I leaned my head against his shoulder, looking out at our beautiful, happy family. "Thank you, Ethan," I whispered. He turned to look at me, his eyes reflecting the golden light of the sunset. He leaned down, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to my lips. "For what?" he asked softly. "For showing me what real love is," I said, wrapping my arms around his neck. "For giving me a home." He smiled, pulling me closer against his chest. "You are my home, Chloe. Always." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, I looked out at the ocean, a deep, unshakable peace settling into my soul. The silence of the last 7 years was finally broken, replaced by the beautiful, sweet melody of a life filled with genuine love, respect, and a future that belonged entirely to us.